We're here with Daniel Levitin at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, where he's going to do a talk this noontime to students and faculty here. UNMC is a partner all week long on our series Creativity in the Brain, and due to that sponsorship of University of Nebraska Medical Center, we have Daniel Levitin with us here, and it's a great honor to have you with us here in Omaha, and really excited about the programs we're going to have today. But what I really wanted to ask you about is something that is, there's a term that's used, and I'm trying to get at something that's either a creative zone or a flow state.
Yeah.
And it's of great interest to me as a musician, because certainly my life changed when I started to discover that there was something that made time suddenly seem irrelevant and allowed me to work hours on something and concentrate. It's a great discovery. What happens in the brain when we go into our flow state? Is there something extraordinary that happens to us when we get into that creative zone?
We don't know a lot about it. The problem is trying to get somebody in that state while they're in the brain scanner, which isn't really conducive to it.
Right.
And there have been a few preliminary studies. What I can tell you is that from what we know now, to be able to enter that state requires that the person have a certain level of expertise. You're not going to enter it in a task or in a domain where you're trying to figure things out. You're using too much of your frontal lobes just to stay on task. When you're driving for the first time, the first few months that you're a kid driver, you're thinking, oh, am I supposed to do this? Oh yeah, I'm supposed to check the rearview mirror, I got to do this. It's all very deliberate. After you've been driving for a while, you reach a kind of low-grade version of that flow. If you've ever driven along the freeway for hours on end, and you suddenly realize you have no idea where you are or how you got there. You're not in an accident, so you've been driving competently, but you might even have missed your exit or something. You've gotten into some sort of a, not exactly the same kind of zone we're talking about of peak performance, but a zone where your brain was running on autopilot. It's as though your brain was somewhere without you, which is kind of a funny thing to say, because then where is the you if it's not in your brain, right? But we've had this experience of disconnection. And what that has in common with these peak flow experiences is that computer programmers and musicians and athletes and artists often report that when they're at their best, they lose track of themselves, like you do when you're driving. They're engaged in the task, they're focused on it, they're using all their resources, but not in a deliberate way, like, oh, I've got to really pull this idea out. It all just seems to be open and flowing, hence the term flow. And it's a state that's been characterized as heightened consciousness, heightened alertness, and yet a kind of narrowing of focus. So it's not that you're not aware of the air conditioner humming or the kids playing outside your window, it's that they're not distracting you. You've been able to wall them off. That state of heightened focus certainly has some neural correlates. My guess, hopefully an educated guess, is that it's subserved by a region called the anterior cingulate gyrus. That's a little walnut-shaped and sized structure right here that seems to mediate the shifting of attention. That is, if I ask you to rapidly shift attention from one thing to another, that's the part of your brain that's doing it, and it's the part of your brain that helps you maintain attention. That, in concert with the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that is at its most advanced in Homo sapiens compared to other species, that's helping us keep on task, and it's orchestrating a mesmerizing and elegant series of exchanges between disparate parts of the brain. I need this, I need that. Go look over here for this memory, look over here for this motor action sequence, but all without our conscious and explicit instruction.
Is there ways that people can develop these things in developing your creative capacities? Do things contribute to making one's capacity grow in that way, or is it more something that's just given to you or not?
Oh, I think it can be developed. I don't know exactly how. That's, of course, the big research question, but I think having experienced it once or twice, it's easier to get it again and to identify when you're on the cusp of it. But part of it is arranging your life. We were talking last night about how Neil Young has arranged his life so that he can react to inspiration. He just drops whatever he's doing when he has a musical idea and he pursues it. He disengages from ordinary life. And I had the opportunity to tour with Sting and the Police a couple of summers ago. And what I saw, these are three musicians who are really at the top of their game. And they're completely insulated from world cares. They don't carry wallets. They don't wear watches. They have people who are acting essentially as their left brain, paying their bills for them, getting them to the church on time, as it were, preparing their meals for them according to, you know, they don't have to make any decisions. Sting and Stuart and Andy. Their handlers are enabling the maximum of creativity. So one of the reasons it's easier for them to get into the flow state is they don't have this nagging thought, did I turn the gas off on the stove before I left the house? Did I remember to pay my mortgage? I mean, all that's taken care of. And these are the kinds of things that, for ordinary people like you and me, can really be interrupters or hindrance.
You know, for people who are dealing with lots of things, there are all kinds of stories there of people who are very successful at juggling. We have our favorite word of the decade is multitasking.
Yeah.
And I'm not very good at it, but I know some people who are. And you must be, because I'm thinking you talked about yesterday about carving out time every day to write. And when you were writing your book, it was about a 5-hour period or 4-hour period every morning, where maybe you tried to keep all of those things at bay that would otherwise interrupt your concentration.
To me, that's not multitasking in the ordinary sense. To me, when I think of multitasking, I think of people doing 6 things at once.
Right.
And I'm not good at that. Individuals differ in their ability to switch their attention from one thing to another.
Right.
And I'm not good at switching. I'm a bad switcher.
Right.
I've got to stick with something. And so for me, when I get in the flow state, it's when I've marked off some time where this is my time to do this, and I'm not going to let anything distract me. I'm not going to check my email. I'm not going to answer the phone, and then I'm freed. I guess, have you had a similar experience?
Not lately, but I would say that going back to days when I would sit with scores and study, all of that sort of thing. And I really even remember when, you know, and I was working so hard at developing my piano technique and all of that was really when I first discovered, and it was at a time where I didn't have the number of things that I do now in my life in terms of potential interruptions.
But I'm betting that you carved out time. You didn't sit down at the piano and say, I'm going to play the piano till the phone rings.
No.
Or I'm going to play the piano, and if I get bored, I'll check my email. I mean,
No, I mean, basically what you have to do, which is why musicians sometimes get a little isolated, is because you basically tell everybody that's normal in your life to stay away.
Yeah.
And that's how you do it. And that's how you can concentrate that much.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, the idea about how proficient some great musical talents get at a very early age is really a sign that they've developed that ability to go into the flow state and happily for thousands of hours, tens of thousands of hours. I don't know if that's something that you mentioned, but you have to work at least 10,000 hours at anything to really get good at it.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.